right. I want to know one thing from you.
Yeah.
What are your 5 favorite soundtracks, music soundtracks?
You know, the soundtracks, oh goodness. You know, when people talk about, oh, the 90s, when what's with the 90s, that you've got the 80s or the 70s or the
Hmm.
60s. The 90s gave us soundtracks. I mean, there was, think about the
Yes.
70s. You had The Wiz, you had Grease, you had Saturday Night Fever. You had those types of classics, but those were not R&B. You had Car Wash, you had certain, but the 90s, I mean, it was almost
Yeah.
as if, we don't do. I mean, I think recently now they've just released a film called The Harder They Fall, and they're really pushing the soundtrack, but it's not the same as the 90s. So,
Right.
if you ask me, when you asked me that to think about that, I was like, wow, I could think of about 8 soundtracks that were just like on fire. If I had to pick
Right. Right.
5, that would be really, really, really hard, really hard. But one of the ones that I think really did it for me, that that really came to my memory, was Juice.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the first ones that I really remembered. The Naughty by Nature, Uptown Anthems. Aaron Hall was on that
Yes.
with Don't Be Afraid. I was like, and then
Oh, I
Teddy
love that
with
song.
Tammy Lucas. Um, oh goodness, like Tammy Lucas, Teddy Riley. Um,
Is it good to
is it
you?
good to you? How can I
Right.
forget that? Yeah. So
Right.
yeah, I was thinking, okay, it just
Tammy
went out
Lewis
my mind.
again on the brain.
Okay, yeah, but Juice was one of the first major soundtracks that I like. Wow,
Hmm.
I can remember. This is before the movie, and it came out like early '91 kind of
Right.
thing. So it was one of the first major ones that came out.
Well,
Um,
when Aaron Hall dropped that Don't Be Afraid,
yeah,
that made me excited for his solo album because I knew, like, I love that song. I remember when I first heard it, I'm like,
yeah,
I love this song. Okay, maybe he
yeah,
can do it without Teddy, because
yeah,
I was just really loving that song and the vibe of that song. So
yeah.
yeah.
That, you know,
Um.
what about yourself? What if you bring up
So
one?
for
Could I?
me, one that really stuck in my brain, um, from my childhood was Jason's Lyric. I used to
Yep, yep.
love that song and the film. I mean, I'm sorry, not song, the soundtrack and the film. There were so many good, like, that soundtrack was one of those soundtracks that's just jam packed with songs. It just had a whole, I think it had like 17, 18 songs on it or
Yeah,
something. I don't know.
yeah,
But Forget I Was a G, Whitehead Brothers was on there.
yeah, yeah.
I love that it was almost like a We Are the World moment where they had You Will Know,
Black
where they
Man
had
United. Yeah,
all the, yes, all the
yeah,
black male R&B artists and singers and groups together on one track, which was just, and it was produced by, at the time, D'Angelo, who was relatively unknown.
yeah,
So it was really a good moment. Tony was on there, just like my papa. It was a lot of good songs
yeah.
on
They,
that
yeah.
project.
That's on my list, but I'm not gonna
Right.
go back and add
I
it to.
want to say Brian McKnight was on there. Crazy Love.
Yeah,
I
Brian
used to
Knight was on
love that
with yeah
song.
with that song, and he was also on that. I think he helped co-produce the.
Produced. You
He
will know.
you would know, yeah. So I mean, Jason Link was on my list, so I'm not gonna bring that up.
Mm,
Menace to
okay.
Society.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh. Mhm.
Menace to Society. You know, that it had the one by MC8.
8. I
Um,
love that song.
yeah, that was
Straight Up
just,
Menace.
yeah, straight
I
up
think it was
Menace.
called Straight Up
Did
Menace.
did yeah.
Oh,
Oh goodness. That was another major one, because on my list as well. Well, I didn't make the list, was Boys in the Hood. But the reason I
hmm,
brought that up is because that Boys in the Hood set up a trend of that sort of the ghetto, the hood movies,
right, right.
which exposed America and the world to life in the hood. So like South Central, and stuff.
Hmm.
And so, and especially in LA, and I moved to LA. I remember moving to LA, driving around Crenshaw and Compton, and like, wow, this is
You actually saw
scary
it. Okay.
living in LA. But I lived in the beach area in West. But but Boys in the Hood was a big one. But then Menace to Society was a different
Right.
film and had a powerful soundtrack.
Right.
Yeah. What
High
about you?
Five was on there. I like that song, Unconditional Love. That's like one of my favorite
Yeah.
High Five songs,
You know,
Unconditional
it's
Love.
it's 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 very rare that you'd get great tracks from an artist on a soundtrack, not on their album.
Right.
That
Right.
it was just yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
people
usually
ask,
sometimes people just kind of they're
yeah, one of the throwaway ones.
inferior
We
or the
don't need this.
throwaway
We
ones.
just put
Yeah.
it on there. But that album, that the 90s. Anyway, what about yourself?
So I'm gonna say I'm gonna drop one. This one could easily be mine. I don't. It's not any order. It's not in
Yeah,
any
no,
order.
is it like you can't
But
be in order?
Nutty Professor, the Nutty
Oh,
Professor soundtrack. I love that soundtrack,
okay.
and that's where we were introduced as Yet with that song Last Night.
Oh,
That was
okay.
the yes. We were also introduced to Case Touch Me Tease Me. That came
Okay.
off of that soundtrack.
Ah,
Yeah. So I mean, it was a lot. It was just a really good soundtrack, and it's other songs on there. It's just a great out. It's like you could just play it. You don't have to
yeah.
turn. You don't have to
Ah,
click through. So yeah, it was a lot of good ones on the Nutty Professor soundtrack, and a lot of memories. So I love
yeah.
that one.
Um, I was talking to. Okay, I'm gonna go with Boomerang.
Oh, okay.
Boomerang.
I gotta take that one
I
off.
had another one. I said, well, let me do Boomerang. I'm sure you might.
Hmm.
End of the Road.
Oh
It
yeah.
wasn't even on. It wasn't on their album. They later re-released the Motown Philly album to put End of the Road on it. But it was you had. I mean, and as I said, we talk about Black Lives Matter now, and oh,
Hmm.
where's the white Hollywood? We had so many black films and directors,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
gave us these. So the films made money and the soundtracks made money. It's almost like what happened. Now we got stuck with Tyler Perry and stuff, but but I'm just thinking about how Boomerang, it was funny Eddie Murphy film, but the soundtrack, they just said you guys make some great music and stuff. So
Mhm.
we had there was just a lot of different tracks on that, but that was one of the bigger ones. We got introduced to Tony Braxton. Love Should Have Brought You Home
Right.
last night.
Yes.
Man.
That launch your careers. And that's the thing about soundtracks too in the 90s. They used to launch careers. Just like
Yeah.
that song launched Tony Braxton. Just
Mhm.
like Last Night from the Nutty Professor launched As
Yeah.
Yet. Touch Me, Tease Me launched Case.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of times it's a good testing ground for new
Yeah.
artists. And a lot of times, I think a lot of times too at that time period, the soundtrack, it was almost like, I mean, it was like, what do you call that when it's two things that work simultaneously at the same
Yeah.
thing
It
at the
was a
same
good
time?
way of
It's like
getting the
two things that
film.
are the
Yeah.
synergy. Like it
Yeah.
just
The
like
synergy.
this, they both sold each other. Like the
Yeah.
music is gonna make you want to see the movie. The movie's gonna make you want to buy
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
music,
Yeah.
and yeah. My next one, I don't know if a lot of people know this one, but I used to love the Low Down Dirty Shame soundtrack. It's another
Ah.
comedy, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
used
With
to
Keenan
love
Ivory
that
Wade.
soundtrack.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the
And
film. I can't remember the soundtrack though. I remember the film. I
right.
remember the poster. But because he was like the
It's
Shaft in the imitation and stuff. Was Janae on
right.
it?
Yes. Now they had a single, they did a remake of Evelyn Champagne King's Shame, which I
Shame.
liked
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think there were a lot of big hits off the album. I just liked it. It was a really well cohesive project. It had R.
yeah.
Kelly's Baby, I think it's Baby, or there's a Homie Lover Friend. One of those are on there.
I mean, I had the
And
album, so there's no album I didn't get. But it's just that I can. That's why. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
Shame. Yeah.
it's just one
Um.
that sticks out to me. It was a fun one. Um, yeah, I'll
Wow.
say that.
I had to put down Waiting to Excel. Um. You know,
Oh,
you can't go without talking about an album without Waiting to Excel. I mean,
right.
you had yeah, I remember Shantae Moore's one. It was
Well,
away, and it was almost like you could hear what she was singing, but it was just like Babyface said, "Look, I know what this is gonna do," because it was such a revolutionary film. Just
Mhm.
black females in running in the film, but the music just intertwined. I mean, Not Gonna Cry, that really,
Mhm.
that
Oh yeah,
you
classic.
could feel the whole thing. I Was Your Wife. Oh, so and Whitney Shoop, was it?
Shoot, I mean, it's one of those soundtracks you literally could pretty much release pretty much 90% of the songs and they would have been
Yeah,
hits. Like I've never, Babyface outdid
yeah,
himself with that, and he
he was, yeah, he was
he
on his,
inspired R. Kelly to do the whole Life thing. I'm pretty sure because Life he
oh,
produced that whole soundtrack. I
yeah.
don't know if that's on there. I didn't. That's not my next one. So if you're going to
No,
use
no,
it,
no. So
but
what's your next one?
my next one is Rush Hour. Rush Hour. I like that one.
Yeah. That's so. This is when I think Def Soul signed a deal with Universal, and
Right.
they did a lot number of songs, and that's where Drew Hill came out. That's they
Yes.
yeah. But go ahead,
How
let you
deep is
talk.
your love how deep is your love for me? I love that song. It's energetic. It's like upbeat. I like upbeat stuff.
Mm,
Faded Pictures, Joe and Case. I love that song. Just really, really well written songs. And you
mm,
had like a mixture of hip hop and stuff. The
yeah.
best ones have the mixture. So that's one of mine.
You know what? I mentioned the Boys in the Hood. Going further back was Do the Right Thing. I don't know if you remember that one.
Mm.
Spike Lee.
And I've never heard the soundtrack. I remember the film. Never heard the
Okay.
soundtrack.
So this soundtrack introduced us to Teddy Riley featuring Guy Fantasy. It was on there.
Oh, I do remember that song. Okay.
Redhead Kingpin's Do the Right Thing was supposed to be on the album, but they just, back in those days, quality control. This was early 90s where they were very much limited to what was in it. So it didn't make the cut. So that was a big
Oh,
one. But most people, because it just at the 90s house party soundtrack, both the first and second were
mhm,
massive, massive, because the film was a low budget film, but because it had
right.
the soundtrack and had the music, that it just blew up. We had Teddy and Rex and Effect. We had Today about Big Bub.
Right.
We had Yo Baby Yo with Ralph. Yeah, it was such a fun. I can still remember being in high school and listening to that. Anyone
I
on
hate when
your
I have a soundtrack where, you like a song from the movie, but it's not on the soundtrack. So
Yeah,
it's like I bought the soundtrack because I thought the song was on here, but it's not.
yeah. I mean, it was very rare, but you normally would get most of them on there.
Right.
I was just thinking. I mean, there was Dead Presidents had a good soundtrack.
Oh, yes. Yes, that
Um,
was a good one.
there was Don't Be a Menace to Society while drinking gin and juice in the hood.
Poetic Justice.
Oh,
I mean,
Poetic
there's so
Justice.
many good ones.
Oh,
Strictly
good.
Business.
Yes, Panther.
Soul Food.
Oh, yes,
Panther.
Soul Food.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah,
remember. Soul
Panther.
Food had a lot of hits on it too.
Yes, Soul
But
Food did. Yeah,
I
Panther.
liked Booty Call. Booty Call had
Yes,
a good one too. They had it's just so
that
many. We got to bring back the soundtracks.
I think that's. I don't know if it will set it off. I didn't do talk about set it off.
Oh, Set It Off. That was
So,
yeah.
I
But we
mean,
got to get black films back though before we get soundtracks, right?
yeah,
But
because that's the thing. When you think about like Set It Off was such a, that's In Vogue's biggest hit was on that film. The whole
right.
storyline of the whole film itself was like seeing black women doing the Thelma and Louise, they're robbing a bank and
Mhm.
then like we're gonna go. It was, it was a F. Gary Gray. Yeah. So I mean, there was so I mean, well, I think I did a poll on soundtracks about early in the year, and I went through so many, and I think the what came on top was of all those soundtracks, it was Wait to Excel became like the number one. When
Right.
you do 10 polls for over a week, and then it consistently comes number one, you put all the number ones together, and Waiting to Excel became everyone's like, yeah, we've got to give it to Waiting to Excel. But
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, people forget that Whitney Houston's they made it her album, but it was really a soundtrack. The Bodyguard, that was a big selling soundtrack.
Yeah,
Like that's
I
probably
think
one of the biggest selling soundtracks of all
it,
time.
it,
One
it
of them.
was, it was, but I think that's set the stage because when they saw how powerful the movie and the songs were, that's when
Mm.
it really people started investing in, and they were making money anyway.
Yeah, what a time.